Welcome to Talk Data to Me with myself, Craig Stewart from Dalebrook Media. This is episode 4 that we're doing. As I've said in the others, we really focused this on the data side of AI. So it's a kind of an AI-centric series of conversations that I'm having with people, but with the focus being on the data, the strategy, the fundamentals, etc., that help companies be successful in their AI deployments. And joining me from Dubai, a good friend of mine, Bart, Pietruszka, who was the CDAO of HSBC for a very long time and has recently started his own business called Refocus AI. And I'm sure Bart will give us a bit of insight into that, but he brings a wealth of experience to the data community as a whole across various parts of it, but we'll be focused a lot on AI. So Bart, welcome. Good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me, Craig, and thanks for building the great community of data analytics and AI leaders.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. It's great working with the community, both in South Africa and the Middle East. So Bart, why don't you just, obviously very well known in the Middle East, in Dubai, but for those that are watching and listening in from South Africa and other locations, why don't you just give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, let people get to know you a bit better.
Well, thank you. I wouldn't say very well known in Dubai or the Middle East, but
slightly
at least
famous.
In the space of data analytics, we definitely work together as a community of specialists, regardless of the sector, whether it's banking, healthcare, retail. You've managed to build a great community of people that are actually passionate and are driven by the insights that we produce. In terms of my experience, as you rightly mentioned, I've been with HSBC for the last 12, 13 years. It's been a great journey, fantastic place to work at. But it's been a time for me to move on, and I've opened my own company, which, as you mentioned, is called Refocus AI. And in that journey, I am now focusing on supporting other companies, mostly financial institutions, and building or innovating their proposition when it comes to those aspects. So it starts with everything from architecture, data analytics, AI use cases, data commercialization, but also touches on AI like ChatGPT implementations and RPA, so the robotic process automations.
Nice, full service offering. Sounds good. All right, well, all the best for that. And also just a shout out to Debbie, my partner in Dubai, for building and managing that community. It's exceptional work that she's doing over there. All right, but let's kick off. AI, everybody's into AI at the moment, whether it be generative AI, AI through different parts of the business. It's just so massive on the sort of hype cycle at the moment. But you kind of think that there's a misuse of the AI label. Why don't you describe that a bit? Why is it being misused? What's the sort of correct way of looking at AI? What is it that companies should be aware of as they embark on AI?
Right. I think it's a great point to start with, Craig. What I think is we've observed similar hype when data analytics became a thing around 2018, 2019. Back then, data wasn't as prominent on people's tongues and in the conferences and the business rooms as it is at the moment. Right now, everyone knows data is important and has to be the inherent part of the business offering, and it provides you with insights. It's relevant because of data quality, it's because of the reporting, automation, etc. So now everyone understands the value. That wasn't the case before. So the reason I brought that up is because that's the same case right now with AI. And there are certain stages. There is a nice graph that I like to show or bring up, which is the Gartner hype cycle, which talks about the different stages of how things start. And we have the first, which is the technology trigger. That was obviously the ChatGPT that suddenly kind of brought the AI on everyone's minds, and people got very interested in that. And we're going to reach the peak of inflated expectations, right? So when people think that AI will fix basically everything, and it won't, because it's still a very specialized AI. It's a large language model, for example, that has got the hype built so well, and it's not addressing a number of other issues that usually you have in the companies that are addressed through different tools, RPAs, etc. The other aspect why some of the expectations of the AI will fail is because not all of the companies invest in AI at the same level, right? Some of them want to do it as cheaply as possible. Some don't want to don't want to invest any money in that. And this will bring a number of companies to the disillusionment stage, which will kind of make people realize, okay, I'm not reaping the benefits I was expecting to. So why have I invested in that in the first place? And then we'll get to a stage where it becomes more stable. The offering of the AI companies is also a bit more mature, and the expectations from the clients will be a lot clearer and easier to define. And that's where we reach this plateau of productivity. So that's where we are at the moment with the data analytics space. So I think this hype just shows that it could be harmful if the hype is kind of building too much for the society. And I guess we're going to reach that stage in the next year or two, and we're going to get to the other pieces and the moments where we're thinking about cost cutting, efficiencies, etc.
Yeah. Sort of something that I kind of just noted down now as you talk through that and as we look through this graph. I mean, this is something that people will be familiar with. It's not, kind of a new thing. It's not just come up for AI. Why do companies still get sort of, I guess, sucked into this hype cycle? It's triggered by something, then there's these massive expectations, then you get disillusioned, then we kind of go through it. Companies have kind of been through that through the years with, the internet, maybe even printing press, all these sorts of things. Why are modern companies still kind of getting sucked into this, like, oh, it's going to be amazing. Actually, it's very disappointing. Oh, actually, we've kind of come out to the other side. Because I think for me, that just seems like, yeah, we can kind of maybe get through that or flatten out that curve a little bit better.
Yeah, I think it's part of the human nature and psychology. So probably not the best person to ask about that. But just to give it a shot, I guess it's natural that we want things to work well, especially if they are impressive, and that's what all of those large language models are at the moment. They do help automating a number of manual tasks. They help us with writing dissertations, whether that's right or wrong. They help us with answering questions that we would normally do the research for hours. So I think there's a lot of good in that. And then people think, okay, this is going to solve all my problems. But that's not always the case, right? We like to see the world in a binary way when it's positive or negative, but that's always somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, Bart, just from your side, some advice on, I think, maybe moving through that trough of disillusionment. Because I think that's obviously where a lot of the, I guess, lack of trust of AI kind of comes in, whether it even be in the data analytics environment. But like from an AI perspective, how can companies get through that trough of disillusionment a bit quicker? What are some of the things that they can put in place, or the data office needs to put in place to kind of, speed up that part of the journey and get to the sort of plateau of productivity a bit quicker?
So from my perspective, there are two components that are actually the same as with the data analytics. So it's the investment, that's one, and two, it's the senior stakeholder support. So both things have to be aligned, and like if there is a CEO or someone senior's support to implement a certain solution, it will trickle down through the organization to ensure that people, the business and the IT, which are usually the components here, plus some other vendors out from the outside, are working together on the same goal, right? So that helps you define the business purpose, business target, helps you see the challenges that you have on the way. All companies have challenges like legacy infrastructure, and the need to adapt it to the slightly newer model. So that, I think that helps a lot when there is a kind of top-down approach from the CEO. And the second one is the investments, and that's the one that companies usually fail on. They either don't spend the adequate amount of money to build something because they can't see the benefits, and we can't blame them. Maybe it wasn't articulated to them well enough, or maybe they really don't see those benefits, which is fine. But I guess once you invest the proper amount of time and money in your company, I don't see a way where it wouldn't bring the proper benefits for any organization, because there's always inefficiencies, like in a Six Sigma approach. You can always improve something by 1%, 2%, 3%, and make something better, right? But with the AI, you actually have an exponential growth. So if you fix one thing, it can probably address between 10, 20, 30% of your operations, especially if it's very manual or FTE intensive.
Yeah. All right, you've kind of talked there about sort of espousing, I guess, the real benefits and efficiencies and power of AI, which is kind of that sort of hype bit, but people need to kind of get to that point through various strategies and tactics and culture change, etc. What are your thoughts, kind of on that sort of, I guess, really talking about the power and advantages of AI? What are your sort of thoughts around these AI products being marketed as AI? It's going to come in, it's going to fix your business, it's going to take over, all these sorts of things, but they're not really AI. And then there's obviously that, well, that's not really doing what we thought it would do. Now I don't trust this AI, but it wasn't actually AI in the first place. It seems like a bit of a vicious cycle.
No, you're right. That's another category that we haven't mentioned during the hype cycle discussion, but that's also harmful for the industry. However, I would say if it fixes a problem and if it's not AI and it's just pretending to be AI, that's already something which is a step in the right direction, right? So I wouldn't kind of be very judgmental about such solutions, but obviously they shouldn't be marketing themselves as the pure AI solutions. If it's a simple algorithm, if it's something rule-based, very code-based, it doesn't give you the propensity, it doesn't use any of the ML methods of learning, supervised, unsupervised, etc., regressions, probably they shouldn't be using that label, and it harms the whole industry. But if it helps meet the business purpose, I guess then I wouldn't be as judgmental as in the other cases.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it obviously what strikes me as you need someone in your business who can dig deeper into the AI solution, something that's being offered, to make sure that it is actually AI. So AI literacy then becomes also picking things that are true AI versus pretending to be AI, as you say.
Correct. But look, even if we're looking at the products of the largest OEMs like Microsoft, IBM, some of their solutions are being marketed as AI solutions, while in fact they aren't. But again, like the MS Dynamics or Power Automate, they are not exactly AI solutions yet, or at least some of their components are not, but they are doing a really good job in making some of the tasks, mundane tasks, especially easier for the companies. So, there is not kind of right or wrong there, but obviously you have to be careful about how you market it. And what I would say also is many of the companies are trying to solve those problems by themselves, but usually that's not the way. Bringing in someone from outside, and I'm talking about my past experiences, my current experiences, helps you to kind of bring the fresh blood, different vision of how things could be done. Because if you haven't solved certain problems for the last 5-10 years, you probably won't be able to solve them for the next 5-10 years with the same resources, and you just need some fresh eye and fresh perspective.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, let's move on to the hot topic of the moment, generative AI, ChatGPT. Obviously, backing that is the implementation of large language models, which not all companies have, or they maybe have all that data somewhere, but they need to obviously put it into a large language model to really sort of take advantage of ChatGPT. How much time does it take to implement such a solution like ChatGPT? Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, we'll just use a Copilot this and Open AI this, and it doesn't really hit the mark. It's not really fit for purpose for organizations. To get it right, Bart, how much time and cost, approximate cost, does it take for a proper ChatGPT LLM implementation in a company?
Okay, well, that's a great question. Before I address that, let me just take a step back and go back to the expectations that we had previously in terms of data analytics. When those functions were created, the expectations was that probably they'll bring some benefits in 24 to 48 months time, because it takes time to remediate your data, to get the data quality in place, to build the reports, etc. Right now, we're facing a lot more aggressive timelines, and fairly so, because such solutions can be implemented in as quickly as 6 months time if the infrastructure, 6 weeks time if the infrastructure is there. So if you have the cloud in place, if you have certain components of your architecture and infrastructure, and it's not so legacy, you can pretty successfully implement a ChatGPT or similar LLM solution in a 6 weeks time. if you lack some of the components or enablers, then it might get extended to some longer period. But I wouldn't say that it exceeds a period of 6 months for any company.
Yeah.
In terms of the costs, again, it's not as scary as many people would think it would be. I mean, if you're going with some of the top companies in the world to deliver that, then obviously the price tag is going to be pretty high and steep. But there's lots of smaller companies offering really good quality products, implementations that can bring it at the levels of, I don't know, several $100,000s, which for majority of the companies is not a showstopper. If you're planning on something smaller, it could even go at the very low end of this number to deliver.
Yeah. Okay, so you say 6 weeks if all is in order, which is kind of, the key thing there is all in order. A lot of conversations I've had with, and I don't know if maybe sometimes people are a little bit more negative and pessimistic or conservative about what they're doing in their own organizations when you talk to them. No one kind of says, we're brilliant, we've got all our data quality in place, all those sorts of things. But a lot of companies still seem to be, I wouldn't say struggling, but kind of on that path to better data quality, obviously having an aligned data strategy, all the fundamentals, data management, data governance, all these sorts of things before they get into generative AI. I don't know if people are maybe just being a little bit cautious about how they sort of position themselves. What's your sort of thoughts? Having spent a lot of time with our community in the UAE, and obviously, kind of what I've talked about from the South African perspective, are companies at that point where all the fundamentals are in place enough to move in a 6-week time frame, or do you think it's more closer to that 6 months?
So let's first start maybe with a question of how many. There is a data maturity model that usually has 5 or 6 stages on it, and it comes from being very manual and being reactive to being predictive and having AI in your insights delivery. So I would say that the companies that have invested a couple of years back in data quality in their analytics practices have reached stage 3 or 4 on that kind of maturity model, which is pretty good. Some of them have reached the 5th or 6th stage, which is excellent. However, majority of the companies are still struggling, and that's again going back down to investment. So you can't really build something if you're not investing and you're not innovating and you're not trying to bring the new products, right? So it's a matter of changing the mindset slightly to invest the money to earn some more money on the back of this, right? And every investment has a certain ROI attached. The question is whether it's going to be a return of 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years, right? So I would say if you take that approach and decide that there has to be some cost attached, but then there's going to be a long-term benefit of that, I guess that's the approach I would take. Not sure if I answered your question over there.
No, absolutely. I think it's, just really understanding in general the sort of, where most are on that data maturity model to kind of get to this point. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to get out of this series is generative AI, LLMs, AI, etc. is all very good, very powerful, but there's so many more steps that needs to go into making sure that you get to that point. And I still find that companies are moving along that journey. And I think, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but hopefully this desire to get to an AI supported, enabled organization puts enough focus on data quality and data governance that investment actually goes in and speeds up and kind of, it's never going to be perfect, right? But kind of gets it to as close to perfect as possible in a short amount of time.
So that's a good point. So there are already a couple of tools in the market that can do that for you. I don't want to, obviously that's unsolicited, but there are tools like Informatica or IBM, SAS, SAP that provide those kind of solutions that can automatically analyze your data quality and maybe improve it on the go. Or they have certain external databases where they can actually curate your data in a much smarter way. But again, we're going back down to investments and to making sure that you can do it and you can take this shortcut, but you have to still invest in some sort of a solution that is in the market.
Right, perfect. All right, let's change tack because I think we can talk about the investment and the will and the strategy and stuff in a lot of detail. But let's move on. So I think one of the things that you put in the notes for this call, which I thought was really important that we cover, sort of, I guess, the more the human side of things, the philosophical, ethical side of things around the impact of AI on jobs and the workforce in general. So many people think that, and this is because they're unaware, right? That AI is going to take our jobs. That's it. We're going to lose all our jobs. But the key thing is, and you kind of put it down here, and I think we've heard this quite a bit. AI is not going to take your job. The person who uses AI will take your job. Use AI as fast as you can. And I think that's really important, right? If even a whole organization, if you're not going to really jump on board with AI, you're going to lose out, right? Similar with employees. How do they get on board with AI? How do they sort of study up? I mean, most people are super scared of it, right? Because it's such a technical, complex thing. How do people upskill themselves to make sure that, they're the person who uses AI and therefore is not going to lose their job, but is actually going to grow with the organization?
Right. I guess so. Like you said, there is a bit of a myth behind this that AI is something which is very complex, which it isn't, right? The example of ChatGPT shows us how simple it can be and how it can facilitate our daily tasks and lives. So I think what is important is making sure that your team or your employees are comfortable with using the solution, right? So it's either saying openly or providing them with the possibility of using it, or building, if you're concerned about security and some of the data or information being leaked out because of the public usage, you can build your own instance and then kind of deploy it for the employees. But what I'm going to say is that there is no way that anyone is going to avoid the effect of AI coming more into our lives, and whether that's the delivery, whether that's the autonomous driving or something else which is technically going to kind of surpass some of the legal knowledge and help us draft contracts in the future. That's still a big responsibility on our side, right? So like the quote that you provided, right, it was from the post that I shared from NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, and he was completely right about it. And I guess there are a couple of things that could be nurtured there if you want to stay ahead, and it's you have to stay creative, you have to keep learning and be open to the new tools. So ChatGPT is the tool right now, and my question is, what's going to be the AI tool that we're going to be using next month or next year, right? There's surely going to be another tool that will surprise us in a number of ways, and I guess that's what you should be open to and stay very optimistic about what's going to happen. And from my experience in terms of is there a risk of losing jobs because of the AI? Yes and no, but it's more towards no, and that's because it's not about losing jobs, but about reskilling yourself and doing something else. Because if suddenly AI becomes better than I don't know, data quality managers, and they're no longer needed because the AI can do all the data quality checks, then those data quality managers should probably go towards visualization, or they should reskill themselves and do some different part of the process that requires a human intervention, maybe business interactions to explain to them why this is important, etc. So I guess there are many different ways how we can navigate through that if only you remain open and try to kind of change your mindset every 2-3 years and adapt to the circumstances.
Yeah. And I think the whole fear around AI taking jobs is also very much, to a degree, hysteria. It's this hype, all that sort of thing. I think it's people who are not kind of going to be that impacted. They just think it's going to take their job. Like, it's going to do marketing for us. It's going to do sales, all that sort of thing. It's not really true. It's going to help you sort of be better at those things. I think, as you say, it's the people who are data engineers, data quality, all that sort of thing. How do they use AI that it doesn't overtake the jobs that they're doing? It's not just a blanket AI can take everybody's job. It's just not possible, right? Maybe that's a very far future type state, and then we probably won't be around to kind of see that if the world is run by robots. But in the immediate term, it's really not true, right? Like, it's going to enable jobs. It's certainly not going to take every job. And one of the last year at DataFest, a very sort of important thing was said around the ethics and morals of AI taking jobs. And one of the things you
Sorry,
mentioned
before we go to ethics and morals, on the point that you just mentioned, I remember a presentation by Dr. Mark Nasila in one of the conferences, one of your conferences, of course, where he presented how people were afraid that some of the technology in the past was making people feel that they're going to lose their jobs, right? Because obviously there were lots of people that were initially doing things manually before, were riding horses before the cars came. There was an industrial revolution where people were scared that the automation will make them lose their jobs, and it did, and it did bring the disruption to the market for a couple of years, maybe a decade. But eventually, those people still had to reskill and do something else. But that was a great example. I remember that resonated with me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, but I guess you had an ethical question on the AI.
That's all good. Yeah, no, bring it up while it's fresh in your mind. So I was going to say, one of the things around the moral and ethics of AI taking jobs. So Professor Benji Rossman from WITS here in South Africa, who's a great mind on these things, said, do we not have a moral obligation for something like, and you mentioned autonomous driving. So being a driver is one of the most popular jobs in the whole world. You got taxi drivers, bus drivers, all this sort of thing. And it also comes with the most amount of risk. Do we not then have a moral obligation to use AI, and this is not totally feasible across the whole world, to automate all driving to save lives? Is it better to give up jobs or sacrifice jobs to save lives? Or is it kind of the other way around? I mean, it's a very deep question. I think we could probably get some philosophers to debate that for hours. But I mean, there's some things where, in a safety environment, surely, robotic or AI-driven sort of entity is better than having a human down there in an unsafe environment.
Think of it from a different perspective. If you're talking about the driver losing his job, what if this driver was just sitting behind the wheel but doing something completely different, generating value in something else? I don't know, writing something, checking on the work of some other people or machines. That's actually a new kind of direction you can go to, right? So let's not think about losing jobs, like you said, because the moral obligation is obviously there. It's less risk if the cars are autonomous. But I would say this driver would have more time on his head to do something else, not necessarily lose his job. Maybe he's going to be controlling a bunch of those self-autonomous cars that are driving, etc. But I guess that's a slightly different approach towards what's the benefit versus what's the risk of losing jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Bart, we've covered a lot in the last 25 minutes. It's been really interesting, really valuable. Still quite a lot to cover from the notes. So I think what we'll do is we'll set up another episode, a part 2, a to be continued between Craig and Bart. There's a couple of things that I want to go into, like the failures of large language models and some other solutions, etc. So we'll put that out. Everybody will no doubt look forward to that. But yeah, in the first instance, thanks so much. I think it's been really insightful and at a time philosophical and sort of a moral conversation, which I love having with you, because it's always we get such a good insights from that. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me on this episode.
Great, pleasure was mine. Thank you so much for having me. And since you brought up also Debbie in the beginning of this episode, I would like to thank her as well for building a great community in Dubai and throwing one of the best conferences you can get to in terms of data analytics and AI in Dubai.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Datalytics 24, I definitely want to dig into that a bit deeper. But yeah, again, kudos to Debbie and big thank you to the whole community for supporting us.
Thanks, Greg.
Awesome. Thanks, Bart.